Welcome everyone, this is Danny and Karl with GetWisdom, and today we're going to continue with the channeling series. And today Karl's going to channel Jim Morrison, who was the lead singer of The Doors, a rock and roll band of the late 60s and early 70s. He was in that club that they refer to sometimes, the 27 Club. He died at the age of 27. And he was amongst that group of very interesting people that came out of the Laurel Canyon. He was the son of a military officer, and so we're going to kind of bird dog that issue a little bit in the series of questions today. And we have done other musicians from that era, not too many, but a few. And so he should be an interesting subject. And earlier, Karl and I were talking about some of the things about this fellow that I was claiming that even some Jim Morrison fans didn't even know about. Namely that he was pretty well educated, smart fellow, and was quite a poet. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us, and thank you, Karl, especially for doing this with us every week, and we can have a little conversation about this and then get started.
Sure. Thanks, Danny. Thanks to all of you watching. This is someone who was an iconic figure for the 60s generation, I guess you might say. And there's a story there, and I don't know that we have really fleshed it out to any real extent. We've channeled a few people from the era, actually probably a number, but more from the political and military aspects, the geopolitical dramas of that time, the assassinations and so on. But some of the cultural aspects, I don't know that we've done justice to. And he was one of these people who was magnetic for so many. And I never was a huge fan of his. I don't know, maybe it was too dark for me. I don't know what it is exactly. But I know people who were just rapt and devoted and would follow him around and this sort of thing. And so now with all that I've been exposed to with mind control and manipulation, it sounds kind of silly, that people enamored of a rock figure would be mind controlled to have that tremendous affinity and devotion. But I don't rule it out.
Right.
Because it's a kind of a holding pen. If you can take a generation of people and make them worship, kind of iconoclastic artists and have something to channel their antipathies against, and then rally around a cultural figure, giving them, some warmth and love, in the form of music and upliftment, if only to justify their political antagonisms and so on. This is a perfect Pied Piper.
Yeah, and he was also a fly in the ointment for the movement in a lot of ways, because, on stage he ended up, for a lot of people, becoming a disgusting figure. He'd be drunk. He was arrested for exposing himself on stage. They created a whole movement of what was the orange juice queen in Florida, and he was indicted for indecent exposure in Florida, and then the city started dropping him off the tour schedule. And it's interesting you say that, like the mind control thing, and we go back and we say, well, what are the connections that we're able to form around this whole mind control thing, and who are the players? Who was interested in that whole thing of mind control? Well, it turns out the reptilians are a prominent figure. Well, this is one of the things that Jim Morrison said. He said, "I'm the lizard king. I can do anything."
Wow.
And he also said,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he said, I'm the lizard king. I can do anything. And another quote from Jim Morrison: "When I was back there in seminary school, there was a man that put forth the proposition that you could petition the Lord with prayer. And then in all caps, you cannot petition the Lord with prayer." So he was put off from a lot of things and sending out messages that were actually antithetical to the divine proposal for the love generation, Yeah. nonetheless, he was very insightful guy. He kind of attacked the normal worldviews that a lot of people of that age had. Here's another quote of his from one of his songs: "People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. Women seem wicked when you're unwanted. Streets are uneven when you're down." And here's another one. "There's a killer on the road. His brain is squirming like a toad. Take a long holiday. Let your children play. If you give this man a ride, sweet Emily will die." And all these, like prophetic, strange. I mean, in a lot of ways, he kind of trumped Dylan in terms of his use of lyrics and creating imagery and revealing the darkness in what everybody considered was normal cultural.
Well, this is often the end result. There's always a fly in the ointment, and if you don't look closer, you might not see it. But many will, and that's the point of having it there. They'll drink the Kool-Aid. It tastes sweet, has a pretty color, and it's got some poison in it. So this does fit. This is kind of like an impromptu theory now emerging, but sometimes I do see things intuitively. So I have a feel for these things, and of course that's just me. So I always seek validation, and that's the point of doing a channeling.
Yeah.
Let him speak for what he was all about and the things that influenced him. So I kind of am hoping, because this discussion prompted this notion in me, that he'll speak to it and help us understand, because I know you're going to probe into a little bit about some of the people he was involved with in that genre and the start of this kind of movement. And so he's getting an invitation to weigh in a bit. So we'll see.
Yeah. He definitely was surrounded with other people that had like similar backgrounds as his. The military connections. His father was actually a Navy admiral in a ship that was involved in the Gulf of Tonkin incident. That was actually the start of Vietnam War. And Frank Zappa's wife and him were, back near some of the military bases where all kinds of nefarious activities supposedly were going on, from chemical warfare to mind control experiments. A lot of people just flat out claimed that Jim Morrison was involved in the MK mind experiments. He had a terrifically hard childhood. He was very intelligent. He was reading books way far above his level for most kids his age. He was berated in his family. I guess he was a bedwetter when he was a young boy. Rather than being helped out of that situation, I think his mother made him go back and sleep in the wet bed. So he ended up spending a lot of nights sleeping on the floor, and then getting a military dressing down from his father on a routine basis. And
well, that's good parenting, isn't it?
Yeah, and then when he
beat it out of him.
When he went to film school in L.A., he was basically disowned, and so yeah, it was a tough go for him, and so maybe some of the things that happened to him could be explained in that microcosm. But here we are. We know about what happens in people's lives, and usually dramatic things. Karmic patterns and stuff are not developed out of a childhood experience, bad, good, or otherwise. It's usually a culmination of many lifetimes and a karmic legacy, if you will.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, because I have clients who, by rights, ought to be dead by now through just destroying themselves because of all they've been subjected to, just hugely abused and mistreated. And yet they're like a shining light still. I mean, how does that happen? Right. And that goes back to the soul connection they have and enjoy, and their inner alignment still, despite it all, and perhaps the lack of a lot of old karmic missteps and travails they couldn't overcome. that otherwise would have taken them down because they wouldn't be strong enough to survive the current life. So I think you're right. This is a long saga. Each of us is involved with. This is just the latest chapter.
Yeah.
This lifetime we're in, and we don't see that connection because we're disconnected from witnessing the past, on a conscious level.
Yeah.
But it's there. It's
right.
there.
Okay. Well, I hope the questions do this. Do him justice. Do the topic justice. It's always a question about what was missed, or could something have been phrased differently to elicit a more detailed or revealing answer. We're constrained somewhat given by what we know, and if we knew, like for instance, if you go back to the earlier channeling series, some of the things that we know now, the questions would have been crafted differently if we had known back then. I always think about the Ann Robards, channeling we did where we talked about the reptilian slave colony. That was quite a data dump given what we knew at the time.
Yeah.
I don't know that we've had any revelations quite that stunning since then, but that's kind of what we're looking for, big steps ahead, because we're some people would claim, and I think they would have a good argument, that we're running out of time. So the more valuable things that we can glean from these channelings in terms of getting our job done, which is partnering with the divine and solving this, this problem with their perpetrators, these ETs that are running the show, the better off we're going to be. So we have 6 questions for him today. He passed away. There was no autopsy. He died July 3rd, 1971 in Paris. Some people say there was heroin involved. Some people say he just drank himself to death. He was found in the bathtub, which is, I think that's what happened to Whitney Houston. So a lot of the same, trappings around, his life and his ultimate tragic end.
Tragic for sure.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. Anyone who achieves a form of greatness and then sees it dissipate, especially through personal dishevelment and self kind of degradation at their own hands, that's all the elements of a screenplay and a great tragedy, and you've got all the great tragic myths of the gods and all this sort of thing. But I think there's a common thread to it, that much of that is orchestrated to happen by the darkness. There is a dark force at work always that's going against us, each one of us personally. And it has many forms, but it's all sinister, and it's relentless in its desire to corrupt everyone and everything. And some are more resilient than others. Some are more heavily targeted than others. And that's when you get the extra layers of interlopers really wanting to take someone out or sideline them because they're a do-gooder.
Yeah.
And they're getting some public traction. Well, we can't have that. We got to keep humanity suppressed
and asleep.
Yeah, and asleep. And if anybody raises a hue and cry, we got to smack them.
Yeah.
And if anyone emerges as a potential leader to draw attention to things that are forbidden, we got to smack them. And this is history in a nutshell. I wish it weren't so.
Yeah.
And it's a hugely cynical view from the average person's perspective. But I've just given you the merest surface description of this, because it is very deep. It is very powerful.
Yeah. And
it's changed everything about who we are and where we've come from and what we've gone through.
Yeah, what we're able to do even. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so if you like, Karl, maybe we could go ahead and start. We've got 6 questions, and we're likely to get pretty long answers to these, as typical. So maybe in the interest of time, we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, you don't need to hear more from me.
Well, no, that's appreciated.
I mean that sincerely, because I want to hear from this fellow and see what he can add to this sort of tale of woe that we've sort of laid out here, that bad things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people, but the bad people get bad by being around bad forces that make them out of alignment and corrupt. And this is a powerful lesson that we so need to learn, that the perpetrators are victims too.
Yeah.
And they're actually victimizing themselves when they commit an act against someone, causing harm. I don't care who it is and what the justification might be. They're incurring a karmic penalty, and that's going to come back to them. So how does that start? It starts from the darkness, always. So it's not to, excuse things and let people off the hook and, let them just go merrily on their way and not have to reckon with what they've done. But it should help us to be more forgiving, because the answer to all of this is getting more love back in the system. And that's like what you were saying before about Jim Morrison's tough childhood. This idea, well, we'll take all the love away. We'll show him, the little snot, he's not going to get away with it. Well, what are you thinking? That's the only way for someone to feel happy and secure and be in alignment. So maybe they don't have to wet their bed at night because they're not having horrible nightmares. They're not filled with dark spirit attachments, messing with their body systems and so on. And so the world's upside down. It's really the problem. So, all right, I told you you didn't need to hear from me, so I'll stop there. But I do care about things, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I really, really want to help. And it isn't easy because most people are complacent, as you were saying, Denny, and that's a deliberate orchestration. I mean, we really should be up in arms every other day about things that happen and get reported in the news. And everybody says, oh, gee, what about that? Oh, hey, what's for dinner, honey? And they turn their TV off, and that's it. There's no emotional reaction, and we're all deadened to some extent. And the ones who aren't get in trouble for it. So there you go.
Yeah.
It's a perfect system.
Yeah, it's a catch-22.
Yep. All right. So I will do my thing as a channeler to connect to Mr. Morrison in the light. And for those just tuning into this series, I do this by going to the creator of all it is and ask to have that communication link established through the divine. I do that for safety and accuracy as well. Most channelers don't use that approach. They wing it. They use their own energy. They go out seeking something or someone, and someone comes up and starts a dialogue, and they think they've got it made. They've got their skill set, and they're really talking to an imposter. This is true for most channelers out there. I'm sorry to have to say this. So be careful and weigh everything carefully. See if it does make sense. And see if there's any mention of real problems and potentially real solutions other than, oh, you just need to think positive and you need to raise your vibration and you need to let more love in your life. And, and that's all well and good.
Right,
and
but it's not going to solve any problems.
It's in the real physical world, it will have very, very little impact.
Yeah.
Because those people who are messed up need to do that. And they can't. They can't do that just by you telling them, well, raise your vibration. Well, how do you do that if you're a schizophrenic? I mean, come on.
And you've got 7 entity attachments. And you're dealing with a backlog of karma from 400 previous lifetimes. So these things just aren't brought up in the normal channel sources out there. I mean, I invite anybody to go look for it. You're not going to find it.
And what they won't tell you is the world is being run from behind the scenes by an extraterrestrial cabal. There, I've said it.
Yeah.
And so that changes everything, does it not?
Yes.
Sweetness and light has no impact on those beings.
Right.
They are loveless. They cannot feel love. They can't respond to love. And they're disconnected from the divine themselves. And they're atheists. And they just laugh at us with all of our silly notions. They think God is a fairy tale. And yet they see humans have some power and they don't know where that comes from, but certainly not from God. They don't believe in God. So there we have it. And so who do you want running your life? I suggest make it you and in partnership with the divine. So I hope we'll get a little bit of a pep talk as well along the way. We usually do.
Yeah.
And so I will reach out through the state of consciousness I need, and Jim Morrison will let us know when he's on board.
Okay, thank you.
This is Jim Morrison speaking.
Thank you for joining us. What were the circumstances concerning your death? Was heroin involved or just alcohol? Did you transition successfully?
Both substances of abuse were major problems for me, and they contributed more directly to my demise. The true reason was the ongoing destruction of my being through a series of manipulations to counter any lofty, uplifting, and positive notion with its mirror image, to corrupt it, to raise doubts and fears within, to get in the way of considering the possibility of human betterment, but focus relentlessly on the dark side of things. You saw this in my work output, which anyone would characterize as glass half empty in tone. That was no accident. It was a reflection of my emotional state of being as a consequence of my life circumstances. But it was also heavily reinforced. So your concept of me being a Pied Piper is quite an accurate one, but I was a Pied Piper for the disaffected, the people in pain, the people who were hurting because their hopes and dreams seemed unrealistic, and they may have tried and failed to advance in life and been punished for being forward looking. Then what hope is there? The next best thing is consolation with someone who will at least hold their hand and sing their praises through an understanding of what it is like to be a tormented individual. That became my signature, and it was an energetic signature, so-called, which is a nice way of describing the shorthand story and energetics of the soul at the moment. This travels with you throughout life and is being added to and taken away from on a regular basis. You erase the bad with good. That is the law of karma. It will change your signature according to how you live, what you put into the world, and what you do for yourself, first and foremost. That is your primary obligation, to serve your soul and safeguard it. No one else can do that as well. No one else will have as great an impact on you and your soul than you yourself, with your thoughts, feelings, and actions. My downward spiral through alcohol and drugs and the tremendous manipulations directed at me by the dark alliance of interlopers led directly to my death. They were seeking this. They wanted me to be an iconic example of the hopelessness of life, that someone who was talented, had a tremendous following and commercial success, could end up dying young, is the precise message they wanted to send to my generation. This is a dark message indeed. And it was the picture I lived day to day in how my thoughts and beliefs were being sculpted, partially from within by dark spirits who possessed me from a young age. They followed me all through my upbringing, cheered on my tormentors, and made me blame myself for being hurt so many times in so many ways, telling me I deserved this treatment and that I was doomed and that I could only continue to survive by serving my masters. This was coupled with extraterrestrial manipulation as well. And we will be talking about this as we proceed with your questions. But all of this degradation was purposeful and orchestrated from outside of me to cause my downfall, and fall I did. And even with death, I did not obtain a release. I simply lost my physical body and the wherewithal to continue as Jim Morrison, and found myself in limbo, tumbling in the dark. But I was not alone. My spirit tormentors were there still and ramped up their savagery because they needed energy like before and were determined to get it by thrashing me. And in that state of torment, I was calling on the divine for greater energy to survive with. And it served my parasites quite nicely. I was like the donkey marching in circles to turn a grindstone to benefit others. And when they needed more energy, they whipped me to get it. That is no way to end one's life. No one deserves this to happen. You certainly don't, but will determine to a large extent by who and what you are during your life, whether you have a smooth passage to return to the light or become stuck in limbo, like I did. That is within your control. Most people give it little thought. The non-believers in God seal their fate many, many times by not expecting a hereafter. When the possibility of death looms, some may see this as a welcome release if their life has gone downhill and they're debilitated, perhaps through a long chronic illness and prior loss of many loved ones whose absence makes life no longer worth living in their perspective. But whether you want release and escape or not, you will not die when the body dies. Your consciousness will go on. Not only will you not have a sick body to inhabit and fret over, you will have no body whatsoever, and you will be in the nothingness. No sensation of anything. You will likely be visited, though, and you will be set upon by demonic beings. Not a pretty picture, but it is a fate you might play into unwittingly. So our desire here is not to scare you, but to wake you up to the reality of how things work. Religion is correct that you have an immortal soul. You go places, but you will not die. No one can kill you, but they can contain you, they can constrain you, and they can torment you if you let them. Even if overpowered, you have divine resources at your disposal. That is what prayer is for. If you reach out to the divine, you can be saved. This takes belief. Without belief, you will not reach out. If you half believe, your outreach will be at half strength and may fail. That too is your doing. You cannot say you failed to win the race because the others ran faster if you have not exercised in months and practiced and trained and took careful measures to have good nutrition and be in peak physical condition for the athletic contest to come. This is no different. If you let yourself go downhill, you will have a consequence through the law of karma, the law of cause and effect. It is just energy. You need to know this so you can prepare yourself for all that may come. It is just common sense. It is no different than being forced to learn things as a child so you can fit into society and become productive and self-sustaining. You need to learn the language. You need to learn customs. You need to learn aspects of personal hygiene and so on, manners in dealing with people, and learn things that can give you skills that are marketable. Special technical knowledge, familiarity with mathematics, and other tools that might be important in trades that allow a generous living to be had. Spirituality is no different. If you give it no thought, no attention, and no concerted effort to work towards being in divine alignment with all you do, including your inner thoughts and emotions, and want a partnership with the divine so that you have a friendship ongoing that is totally believed in, you will not do well because you will be surrendering your greatest source of strength. And in fact, the origin of the life force within you. Many people die because they have given up on the divine. And in response, the life force energy will wane. In a sense, that seems harsh and cruel. And most might agree with that assessment if God lets them die. But if you are choosing that and your life is on a downhill path, how does it serve you to let that continue, to languish ever longer in a state of despair? That only makes things worse, because you'll be damaging yourself every minute of every hour of every day. So release from that can be a blessing. What we are saying here is there is nothing negative about the divine. It is only a positive force for good. If it is acting on behalf of a higher good or the highest good in a situation, that might be discernible by those at a human level in the moment. But we guarantee you that the divine is your friend, your greatest friend, your best friend, and your friend forever. Because you are actually a part of it. You are an extension of the divine directly, in substance, in meaning, and in actuality, in terms of what your energy consists of and where it comes from. That is called identity. It is not an idea. It is not a religious notion. It is not a folk tale. It is physics. Physics is a divine creation, as are you. So to be lost in limbo is a dark fate you do not deserve, but may well arrange for yourself in ignorance. And that ignorance might in turn, and most likely, has come about because of manipulation by the darkness working against the light and all it does. That is what happened to me during my life and led to my downfall and my unfortunate state of inner corruption, leaving me tumbling in the dark because I could not see the light reaching for me. That is diagnostic of someone who has become corrupted and separated from their alignment sufficiently to put them in a dark place and disconnect them from their divine partnership. I was rescued. The greatest of blessings that could ever be bestowed on a human being, to save me from the darkest of times, the greatest of horrors, and the most dire of penalties, largely self-penalties, in looking at the history here. I am eternally grateful for that rescue that came at the hands of those speaking to you today, in providing the wherewithal and the knowledge and the training to save hapless souls like mine from this dark fate. You can be saved as well being part of the healing they are bringing forward. And you can take part yourself in helping many personally avoid this dark fate.
Okay, thank you. You told of an event that when you were young, you were driving in the desert with your family and came across a vehicle accident where Native Americans were injured and killed. And you claim your soul merged with one of the dead, and that fueled your artistic endeavors. Is this accurate? And if not, can you tell us what happened and what effect this experience had on you?
This was accurately described as far as it goes, and as far as I was aware consciously of what took place and the consequences. This speaks directly to the issue of spirit possession I mentioned about in recounting my struggles in life. There are dark demonic spirit beings in large numbers preying on the living. These are fallen angels who turned away from the divine through arrogance and ignorance as well, fell from grace and could not find their way back. They have been cut off and can only exist as parasites of living things. This is the greatest of penalties, but was self-chosen, not a rejection or lack of forgiveness by the divine. If you have a serial killer who you forgive for destroying one of your loved ones, that does not prevent them from continuing in their killing spree. That may rescue you from a karmic entanglement through harboring a grievance, resentment towards that killer and hating them so. That is a divine blessing for the self. But each person who does wrongdoing must reckon with the harm to their own soul. So forgiveness from another can be a start on a better path, because it does reduce their burden to a degree, but there will still be much needed to happen. When I encountered that tragic accident scene, my sympathies in the moment went out intuitively to the victims. And the soul of one of the departed, hovering about the scene, still in limbo, recognized my intuitive outreach as a kind of welcoming energy. And he was drawn to me and welcomed within by my deep subconscious. It was an impulse of goodness from me that set this in motion, but in actuality represented an unguarded moment, because it does not serve the self to have the consciousness and energy of a discarnate spirit within one's physical being. At a minimum, it is confusing to the physical body, having two masters on board at the same time. It is a prescription for many difficulties. And if the spirit in residence now is that of a troubled individual, This will add to the personal burdens of the host, because they are shouldering not only their own troubles, their own negative karma that will be stirred up from day to day as they proceed in life. Inevitably, there is the karma of their onboard partner now that will be impinging as well, and seeking a resolution from a being now largely helpless, lacking a body of its own and a means to work on things and improve their lot. I was aware intuitively that this was a presence in my life, and I put a positive spin on it because I did not know otherwise to question this or to be alarmed about it. It seemed quite special, and in that sense, of course, it is. It is a living testament to the reality of the divine as a reflection of the immortality of the soul. Humanity has yearned through the ages of proof there is an afterlife. And of course, the reality is that proof is offered again and again and again. My own life story is a testament to this. But it is not believed by the general public to a large degree. And that is because of a manipulation through mind control to make people disbelieve in the supernatural. Because it is disempowering if they disbelieve. If you are an extraterrestrial civilization wanting to ride herd on a natural colony of human beings and really run their world for them and through them, making them in effect slaves and puppets of their master, you have to conquer them through commandeering their society at all levels that matter, especially governance. It would not serve to let them have notions like religion through which they congregate in large groups to think alike and put their consciousness to work on a problem or issue, and then bring about something to help them or others of their kind working against the cabal of interlopers in charge of things. That is why religion has been suppressed and corrupted, not because the interlopers believe in the divine, but they believe in humanity and the power of human thought to make things happen. Even the humans at this point discount a religious or spiritual explanation for the miracles they witness. They think it is good luck, good fortune, clean living, personal preparation to set them up for success, to be in the right place at the right time, and so on. And mystical notions through the New Age movement, which are a disinformation campaign as well. One of disempowerment, to think the only power rides within you personally. So if you sit in the corner and meditate, you can influence the world. The interlopers want you to believe this. You will not influence the world in that way. but to a tiny degree. It is through pooling your thoughts in partnership with the divine, especially when you have a chance of influencing things on a wide scale. My spirit attachment was similarly disempowered and was in quite a state of emotional disarray, as well as spiritual disarray. That is why he was drawn to a living human and not the light, to journey home to the higher realms, and became, in effect, self-imprisoned. I provided a safe haven, but it was as much a jail cell as anything in terms of the tremendous expansion he would have enjoyed going back to the light. There are many such lost soul human spirits out and about, largely attached to living persons. It is a way to be protected and to have some comfort and reassurance through an energy of someone like themselves. People are created to be with others and to share love with others. You will always yearn for this, no matter how cynical, negative, and corrupted you might become. There will be a part that misses getting a hug, a kind word, and being the center of attention from someone loving them unreservedly. When that is absent, life will often be curtailed, and the possibility of corruption much, much greater. I did not foresee the downside of having spirit possession. I had a dual liability from that encounter, in addition to which I had a whole group of dark spirits possessing me in addition. And that was a headwind for me all of my life. They bullied me continually in a deep part of my mind. And the end result was emotional distress that was chronic and quite intense. They worked to dampen the connection to my higher self. That is your link to the soul level and beyond. It is the way that God can talk to you intuitively via that channel. Your higher self talks to you in a deep part of your mind. But not if you are not prepared to listen. If you become cynical and bitter and too heavily wounded, you may reject an outreach from the higher self with gestures of support and encouragement. If you say no to your higher self, you will truly be on your own. It is one of the rules that you are in charge. Even if you decide to destroy yourself, you are allowed to do so. That is the extreme power you hold. In effect, being the king of your kingdom. such as it is. Power brings with it responsibility, of course, and power is greatest when it is amplified through sharing in a cooperative effort with other like-minded souls. The saying, two heads are better than one, is quite true, as long as they are in a cooperative alignment and not an antagonistic conflict. You, in reality, are members of a close-knit human family because all of your souls are interconnected directly with one another. You are a free agent in terms of operating parameters and the possibility of choice. But that connection cannot be severed. It can only be ignored and neglected. If you harm yourself, it will harm everyone else in the human family to some degree, and you will be missed if you turn your back. The same will be felt by the Almighty, but you will simply be a sore within the divine body, so to speak. You will be allowed to have control of things in your domain, for better or for worse. So this was a worsening for me to have this attachment. And it is a testament to the state of ignorance of the current world that people are largely ignorant of such phenomena, because this phenomenon alone speaks to so many things. And the reality, not only of immortality and the workings of the soul, but the workings of karma in often deciding what direction things will take. When things go wrong, when things fall apart, when people decline, they are going against the yearning of their soul, always. It is never what your soul wants to happen. So there will always be something traceable as an influence for this calamity. And it will often prove to be a direct interference by interlopers, either spirit or physical in nature. Other human beings dragging you down, or physical extraterrestrial through their machinations to bring negativity into your life through a misdirection or a direct energetic influence on the body, or to maneuver people around you to bring you temptation and distractions, or to cause harm to you directly, to keep you in a bad emotional state that may become chronic and sideline you for the rest of your life. This is the role of parents, all too often, who abuse their children, not because they are evil. It is because they are corrupted by evil, working through them. And they are in a state of ignorance, allowing this to happen unopposed, because it seems to be their own notion and their own feelings they follow. Many times people lash out in anger at others and it feels fully justified to them in the moment. If they only knew that anger was ginned up by dark spirits within them, using a slight or some rule breaking as a justification and affront to their personal authority, and threatening their ego in some way, and essentially lighting a match to a fuse. The interlopers are highly talented in finding all of the karmic hot buttons, so to speak, within their host. And they can get a fight going, a campaign of negative destruction using their host as the instrument directed at another, and often at the marching orders of extraterrestrial spirits, instructing them on how best to worsen the world, who to go after, why, and how. And it becomes a carefully orchestrated campaign, as powerful and awesome and destructive power as the greatest of human armies with all their technology. It is an army of evil out and about, living amongst you and manipulating everyone. I took aboard yet another victim and was victimized in return. No different than if you bring in a homeless person who might be mentally unbalanced in some way. You can lavish them with kindness, shower them with goodness and a lifestyle they've only dreamed of. But you will need to arrange deep healing for them, most likely, to help them truly get back on their feet fully and recover from all that has happened. That last part is what is largely missing from your world, because you are being maneuvered and manipulated to disallow spokespersons who can explain the true workings of spirituality in the deep ways it can bring relief, turn things around, and help you win the day, no matter what has befallen you. This everyone needs to cope with their backlog of karmic dishevelment. All have an uphill climb to recover from the difficulties of prior lifetimes. This, the divine, can teach you, and has, through your channel and others, through the ages, but largely has fallen on deaf ears and corrupted again and again and again to diminish the teachings, to edit out key phenomena in their discussion, so the tools are blunted and become more make work than a successful spiritual exercise in the end. You can do better. And if you listen to our teachings, those of us in the light supporting this effort refer to this on a regular basis, the Lightworker Healing Protocol, and the power of using prayers designed to be empowering and leveraged to maximize their reach This has never existed in your world heretofore, but can be the dawn of a new era to change everything for the better.
Okay, thank you. You became one of what is known as the Laurel Canyon. You became one of what is known as the Laurel Canyon crowd of songwriters and musicians that eventually defined the hippie movement, the rock music scene, and the youth uprisings of the day. There seemed to be an odd mixture of genuine creativity and also some dark underpinnings of MK Ultra-like manipulations and control, with many in that Laurel Canyon crowd having military and government intelligence agency connections. Even your father was intimately involved as a Navy admiral in the genesis of the Vietnam War in the Gulf of Tonkin incident. What are the connections, if any, and what was the spiritual landscape for those times and the purposes they ended up serving?